Hello, I'm Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. The defense in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial is attempting to paint an unflattering portrait of the accuser's family at Neverland. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Hi, Savannah. Before we begin, I just want to let our viewers know that Michael Jackson has arrived at the courthouse. This is videotape of Jackson from just a few moments ago. Now, Savannah, there were 9 witnesses on the stand yesterday. Fill us in on the highlights.
Well, many of those witnesses, Amanda, had things to say about John and James Doe, the boys at the center of this case, that were not particularly flattering. There was a security guard by the name of Shane Meredith who said that he once caught the boys with alcohol in Michael Jackson's wine cellar with Michael Jackson nowhere in the vicinity. He said he saw the boys giggling and laughing and that there was an open bottle of wine on the table. He said the boys seemed shaken when they saw him and then he scurried up the stairs. On cross, he had to acknowledge he never saw them actually drink the alcohol, but the implication was clear that these boys had broken into Jackson's wine cellar by themselves. Another witness by the name of Angel Vivanco had quite a few stories to tell. He said that John Doe once cursed at him, saying, "Give me the blanking Cheetos," asking for a snack. Angel Vivanco was a chef's assistant. Another time, James Doe, who's the younger brother of the accuser in this case, according to this witness, held a knife to him about an inch from his head area, neck area, and made him very nervous, he said. Another time, he said that James Doe, the young brother, had Angel Vivanco whip up a milkshake for him and then asked him to put liquor in it. There was another witness, Marie Gomez, who's a longtime maid at Neverland, who said that she found a stash of pornographic magazines in a backpack in the guest unit where James Doe, the younger brother, and Judy Doe, the older sister, were staying. All of this testimony, of course, is to paint a picture of the accuser, his brother, and perhaps his sister as being no angels at all, something that the defense has repeatedly suggested throughout the case and now seems to be putting its money where its mouth is by putting on these witnesses who say they saw these children up to no good at Neverland.
Savannah, tell us about the waxing controversy concerning the accuser's mother and testimony from a day spa employee.
Yes, and why is this important, right, Amanda? How come a waxing incident has become so important? Well, let me tell you. Jane Doe, when she was on the stand, vehemently denied that she had had anything other than a leg wax at this salon. She contended that she paid for it, not Michael Jackson. She didn't even want to see the receipt. Tom Mesereau offered to show her this $140 receipt that would apparently show that she had a full body wax. She didn't want to see it because she insisted, no, 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 I had only a leg wax, and if the receipt says something different, it's the masters of choreography, Jackson and his people. Well, this is important, of course, because Tom Mesereau has had some fun with the notion that Jane Doe, while imprisoned at Neverland, managed to go out to a salon and have a full body wax. Well, having made those suggestions through the questions, again, the defense put on a witness, an esthetician at this Los Olivos spa, who said, yes, indeed, she gave a full body wax to Jane Doe, and she identified the receipt and said, yes, that was the receipt from it, and she said that Jane Doe seemed, not under any kind of stress and didn't cry for help or any of that kind of thing. So, again, it's just another witness, perhaps not terribly important in the overall scheme of things, but another witness to kind of detract from the credibility of a lot of what the mother has said on the stand.
And Savannah, did the accuser's mother pay for that treatment?
Well, here's the thing. It's kind of a tale. She didn't pay for it. Michael Jackson's people paid for it, but she contends that they owed her money because they lost her luggage. Actually, it wasn't even luggage. It was a plastic bag that she had tied to her luggage, and since they lost that, she reasoned that those items were worth about $140, and so instead of basically charging them or trying to get reimbursed for the things she says they lost, instead she had this leg wax for $140. So if you ask her, she paid for it. If you ask them, Michael Jackson paid for it.
All right, thanks for straightening that out. Savannah, also, what else can we expect from the defense case? What's ahead?
Well, we think today we're going to hear from 2 workers from the Department of Youth and Family Services. Those are child welfare workers in Los Angeles who interviewed the Doe family in February of 2003. And as we all know from previous testimony, everybody in the family, the mother, the brother, the accuser, the sister, all denied that anything had happened with Michael Jackson. Now, of course, this interview took place on February 20th, 2003, and the accuser says that the alleged molestation didn't happen until after that in March of 2003. But in any event, we expect to hear from them. And then a big headline witness on Thursday. We expect to hear from Larry King, the talk show host. Apparently, according to the defense, he could testify that he was at a breakfast or a brunch meeting and saw Larry Feldman, this is the accuser's and his mother's civil attorney, and that Larry Feldman, according to King, we believe the defense says anyway, will say that Larry Feldman said the mother wasn't credible and that the family was after one thing, which was money. The defense is also trying to bring in another witness who was there allegedly during this conversation and also heard it. His name is Michael Wiener. He's a publisher. There's a motion to exclude that testimony. To my knowledge, the judge has not ruled on it yet, so we'll have to see. But right now, the plan is to have Larry King come in and testify on Thursday. And we also hear that Jay Leno, the talk show host, could be here on Monday.
All right, Savannah, thanks so much for that report. Savannah Guthrie, of course, reporting live from Santa Maria, California. And stay tuned to Court TV. We're going to continue to have live updates from outside the courthouse. We're also going to have specials on the Jackson trial throughout the day, 12:32, 3, and 4:30 Eastern Time.
Made other statements. Many of them, so far, have been disproved in court. Back to Diane Dimond, I know some of these are small things, Diane, but when you promise something in open, you darn well better deliver. Remember what she said about the what he said about the Laugh Factory, Jamie Masada, and the female comedian, how he was going to show that this family was all about grifting money. And then the witnesses came on and said something completely different. The mom said, I don't want money, just pray for us.
Yeah, it was Jamie Masada, Louise Palanker, and another comedian named Fritz Coleman. In Tom Ezra's opening, he promised they would all come here and talk about how there were all these fundraisers, how it was a mother-son grifter team, and those three people came here. Oh, and George Lopez too. So that's four. Their testimony was completely different. So now we have a promise about what Larry King will come here and say. That he talked to the mother's attorney, and he said, "Oh, she's all about the money, she's kind of flaky." Larry Feldman has already been here and testified that that's absolutely incorrect, that he never said that. And a third party who is alleged to have overheard this conversation, Michael Wiener, he said, I never had a conversation with Michael Wiener or with Michael Wiener present. Nancy, I need to tell you something. We've just gotten something from the courtroom. It's vague, and I apologize for that, but that's all we've got. We've just been told that the defense in the next 10 minutes will call 2 minor children to the stand, one at a time, of course. We don't have any other information about that, but we do know that there are 11 members of Michael Jackson's family on his witness list, including his own son. There are also the names of some other boys in the neighborhood. They call them the Los Olivos boys. That's a little community near the ranch, who are expected to testify here. So I don't know exactly which ones. The court has not been told, to my knowledge, which ones will be coming, but apparently some pretty compelling witnesses, young boys, taking the stand here.
Very quickly to Jason Oceans. Jason, is it okay to put these thoughts in the jury's mind and then...
Larry King and Jay Leno are both expected to show up. We're going to tell you how they're connected to the case in just a moment. But first, Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Dimond, has more on what happened today. Diane, let's dispense with a witness I was not particularly impressed with. Tell me if I'm wrong. This Angel Vivanco, I understand he finished his testimony.
Yeah, he was only on the stand for about 5 minutes today at the beginning of the day, and he was an assistant chef at the ranch. He struck up some sort of relationship with the accuser's older sister. She was 16 at the time. He was about 20. The most damaging things I think he testified to were some instances where the youngest brother of this family held a knife, playfully held a knife to his neck. The accuser asked him to make him a milkshake and put liquor in it, said, if you don't do it, I'm going to get you in trouble with Michael Jackson, and that the accuser, the young accuser, swore like a sailor, frankly. And today, on cross-examination, they brought out the fact that, well, were you threatened by this knife? No, not really. Did you report this to your supervisors? Yeah. Did you think it was bad enough to report it to the police? No, he said, I didn't tell anybody else. Okay. That was that.
Yeah. All right, now what about the social workers? Because these two could have been very important, although I'm a little troubled because it's my understanding all the social worker conversation with the family took place before the alleged molestation. Did that point get made by the prosecution?
No, and I think the prosecution was intent on, these were defense witnesses, okay, Karen Walker and Laverne Peters, and they talked about the meeting they had February 20th with this family because there'd been a cold call after the Bashir documentary. We're worried about this kid, a charge of perhaps general neglect and a charge of possible sexual misconduct with Michael Jackson. They went out, they talked to the family an hour or two, they decided everything was fine. Tom Sneddon did the cross, and he used the opportunity to underscore the frailties, frankly, of the Child Protective Services Department here in California. You had a month to do this report. You kicked it out in about 10 days. Did you ever go and talk to Michael Jackson? No. Did you ever go and see? The mother told you that Michael Jackson's bedroom door was always open. Did you try to see if that was true? Well, no, that's not really my job. Did you call the police in? Because there was a possibility of criminal action. Well, we called the LAPD and they said it wasn't their jurisdiction. If anything had happened, it had happened in Santa Barbara. But no, you're right, Catherine. The major point is this meeting was February 20th. And when you look at the indictment here, the alleged molestation began after February 20th. And I would have thought the defense would have underscored that point with these witnesses, but not so. Karen Walker, the last one, is about to leave the stand if she hasn't already, and we've just learned that 2 minor children will be called next. We don't know who they are. We do know that they will not come through the metal detector. We won't take a picture of them, of course, and one of them will be on the stand soon if they aren't already.
All right, well, we'll obviously get updates on that during the course of this conversation. But real quickly, what were the original dates that the district attorney's office set out as the molestation dates? Because that window narrowed and moved into March. Were those dates ever encompassing February 20th?
No, it says sometime after February 20th to March 12th, if I'm remembering correctly. I have the indictment here. I can check it out.
I'm talking about. No, it was the numbers were changed. When we first got a report on this story, it was a broader time period. It was earlier in February, and the dates changed. What was the first parameter?
February 6th, right after Martin Bashir aired.
Okay.
And remember, there were charges against Michael Jackson. He came here and he was arraigned. That was the day he danced on top of the car. Then the grand jury indicted him. There was another arraignment. So between those 2 times, you're right, Catherine, the dates did shift.
Okay, well, we're going to bring our panel in on this. With us is former prosecutor Bill Fallon and criminal defense attorneys Robert Gottlieb and Billy Martin.
Companies record telephone calls and keep track of them. Today, I believe that we will hear from up to 3 different police officers who will kind of put all that together for the jury. Last week, we saw all these phone bills from different people, the unindicted co-conspirators, Michael Jackson's secretary, all sorts of people surrounding the King of Pop. Today, I think these detectives will put it all together in a sort of timeline pattern for the jury. And, you know, if the state's case is to be believed, there were, after the Martin Bashir documentary, panic telephone calls going back and forth among the unindicteds and all sorts of others, travel agents to get the family out of the country, etc. So I think that that's what the jury will hear today. And then also on tap are some financial witnesses. One of them, a man named Duras O'Brien, is set to talk about Michael Jackson's financial house at the time all of this was happening. It's the state's contention that Michael Jackson was pretty much broke, and so making this rebuttal video and selling it to Fox, actually 2 separate videos, for millions of dollars was really, really important, and that's one of the reasons they held this family at the center of the case so closely, because they needed to make some money. Now, one thing, we're not sure exactly how much Mr. Duras will be able to go into Michael Jackson's finances, because the judge has sort of left a decision hanging. He may be able to give one big overview picture, or they might go into it even in more detail. And one more witness I think that we may get to today. This is a woman at a bank that unindicted co-conspirator Frank Cassio Tyson went to back in March of 2003 with a letter from Michael Jackson himself authorizing him to take out $1 million in cash. So I think she'll be on the stand today, too.
Interesting letter. Diane, on Friday, jurors heard about some books featuring photographs of adolescent males in sexually suggestive poses. I actually read your editorial in the New York Post as well. You know so much about these books and the possible significance. Can you tell us about the evidence?
Yes, it was a little reported, actually, as to the content of these books. We knew the titles. One of them was Boys Will Be Boys, and the other one, The Boy, a photographic essay. And we told our viewers about that book several months ago. We knew that it had been taken in the raid back in 1993. And as you say, we have pixelized out some of the more graphic parts of the pictures, but there are still many more that we cannot show you because they are so sexual in nature. We, I think, are the only ones, Court TV are the only ones who actually know what's inside the book. The jury was not shown the inside of these picture books. They're big coffee table volumes. They got to see an inscription that Michael Jackson wrote inside one of them, and I'll tell you, it was on the Boys Will Be Boys book, featuring 4 young boys doing cannonball dives into a big pond, big smiles on their faces. But the inscription read, "Look at the true spirit of happiness and joy in these boys' faces. This is the spirit of boyhood, a life I've never had and have dreamed of, the life I want for my children." But when you look inside these books, Amanda, it is, according to one expert I spoke to, Dr. Patricia Farrell, out there in Fort Lee, New Jersey, she looked at it and she said, this is just child erotica. There are a lot of pictures of, you know, close-ups, portraits of boys' faces, but then inside the pages of the book, scattered throughout the more than 200 pages of a photographic essay, for example, are these completely nude pictures of boys, full frontal nudity. There's a picture of a boy climbing a tree shot from below, and he has a frightened look on his face, only wearing a pair of tennis shoes, for example. She said that these types of books are often used to groom a target. In other words, the adult will sit with the child and look and say, gee, look, doesn't this look like fun? Wouldn't you like to go swimming like this, naked like this? So I think the significance of these books cannot be overstated, and I think when the jury gets back to that deliberation room, I think it's the state's hope that they will make a beeline for those books to check out what's inside.
It's interesting you mentioned the inscription, Diane. Did Michael Jackson do that routinely on other books, other material?
Well, we don't know that. I've never seen an inscription like this before, and I think it's important to note these 2 big coffee table-sized books are called art books by some people, but they weren't out on the coffee table. The detective who seized them, Rosabelle Ferfarino-Smith, told the jury on Friday that she found them during a search of Neverland inside a closet, inside a locked filing cabinet in the 3rd drawer. So these weren't something that Michael Jackson was displaying, but rather keeping under lock and key.
But a very personal statement about the childhood he lost. Interesting. Diane,
right.
Finally, we're all anticipating the defense to begin its case this week. Hard to believe it's finally here. What do you think that defense will be, and what can we expect?
Well, week number 10 we're in now, and I believe, I'm going to tell you, I don't think the state can finish by Tuesday. They've been saying that they'd be done by Tuesday, but they have these 3 officers today, the bank lady, the financial man, and then this, I think, their wrap-up witness, a man named Rudy Provenzio, who used to work for one of the unindicted co-conspirators. So I'm not sure they can get all that in by Tuesday, but the defense will start this week, I suspect. And you know, if I know Michael Jackson, I think he probably wants to have a big, important star. Macaulay Culkin would be terrific, but I'm not sure Macaulay Culkin is going to come. So then we're down to maybe Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker had a lot to do with this case and knew the family and whatnot. His fiancée Aja, and I think that the defense is thinking that some of the young boys who go to Neverland routinely and say nothing ever happened to them, a boy named Rio Jackson, for example, his brother Elijah, their sister Simone. I think people like this will be tops on the defense list.
All right, Don.
Hello, I'm Monica Pergament with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Well, it appears the defense case may be nearing an end in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, before we get to the latest developments, I just want to let our viewers know that this videotape you see here is Michael Jackson arriving for court just moments ago. And as we look at that tape, Savannah, why don't you tell us about the end game involving the defense?
Yeah, these may be the waning days that we watch Michael Jackson walk up to the courthouse. Court TV has been reporting this morning that the defense may rest its case as early as next week, and that puts a lot of people raising their eyebrows because, as we all know, there was a defense witness list that had some 500 people on it. What we've understood is that the defense plans to intensely narrow down that witness list, and that we're looking really at about 45 to 50 more witnesses, and that they could conclude their case as early as next week. While that sounds like perhaps an optimistic view of the schedule, remember on Monday we whizzed through 10 witnesses in one day, so it is within the realm of possibility. If that's the case, then the speculation would be that Michael Jackson won't be taking the stand, since if he were to take the stand, you'd think that that would take several days. So if that estimation is true, the defense resting next week, I think we are then looking perhaps at a short prosecution rebuttal case, maybe a couple of days, and then perhaps closing arguments after Memorial Day. We understand that the defense no longer plans to call some of these character witnesses, such as Liz Taylor, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, so we won't see the parade of celebrities that some people were expecting, perhaps. And it may be that we have this case and coming to a verdict sooner rather than later.
Somebody who we have seen on the stand is Jackson's cousin, Simone Jackson. Tell us about her testimony, Savannah.
Well, she's 16 years old and she lives in Lompoc, California, which is not far from Neverland, not far from here, and she spent a lot of time at Neverland. Particularly, she talked about 2 visits during this key time period in the case, February of 2003 and March of 2003, when the accuser and his brother and sister were there. The 2 important parts of her testimony are these points. Number 1, she said that in March 2003, she once saw John Doe, the accuser, and his brother, James Doe, sneaking alcohol out of Neverland's kitchen about 1 in the morning. She said she saw them both with bottles of wine, and that the accuser actually had a bottle opener. She said they didn't see her at first, but then when they did, she said something like, "You're not supposed to be doing that," and they told her to be quiet, and then stole into the night outside the back, through the back door of Neverland. She also said that she really befriended Judy Doe. That's the accuser's older sister, who was about 16 at the time. She said they became friends and they'd hang around Neverland and chat about their lives, and she said that in particular Judy Doe said at one point in March 2003, "Well, we have to go to Brazil. We're going to Brazil. I don't want to go." But she indicated that her mother, Jane Doe, did want to go. That's important, of course, because Jane Doe has testified that Jackson and his people were trying to ship the family off to Brazil, and that they certainly didn't want it to go to a different country. So could be important testimony, and her testimony continues today.
Now, before she was on the stand yesterday, Savannah, there were child welfare workers. Tell us about their testimony and their experiences with the accuser and his family.
Well, these are 2 of the 3 workers who interviewed the accuser's family on February 20th, 2003. This would be right in the heart of their alleged false imprisonment at Neverland. And during this interview, these workers say that Jane Doe and the children vehemently denied that Michael Jackson had done anything inappropriate with them. They didn't cry out for help. They didn't say, "Hey, we're being falsely imprisoned." And so that was the importance of their testimony. Not only that, in many ways, there was testimony that Jane Doe was very effusive in her praise of Michael Jackson, and that she was really reaching out to praise Michael Jackson. For example, both workers say when they first came for the interview on February 20th, 2003, that Jane Doe gave them hugs and then said, "Come watch this video," popped in a DVD that showed Michael Jackson and the accuser, a much younger accuser, about 10 years old when he was suffering from cancer, walking around Neverland, strolling over the bridge, and there was music playing, really trying to show that there was this very nice, innocent relationship between Michael Jackson and the accuser.
Savannah Guthrie reporting live from Santa Maria, California. Thank you so much for that update.
Sure.
And stay tuned to Court TV. We will continue to have live updates from outside the court.
On its hands, and of course Mesereau has not been doing that. Rio Jackson, one of the relatives who took the witness stand, testified for Mr. Mesereau, and obviously Mesereau putting on a case here, but prosecutors also have the right of cross-examination. What happened with Rio Jackson on cross?
Well, I think the biggest point scored by the prosecution was the prosecutor really drilled down on this incident where Rio Jackson said the boys had stolen wine from Michael Jackson. As it turns out, the chef delivered the wine to Michael Jackson's room. By the way, the boys were present, Rio Jackson, the accuser, his brother, and Jackson, and he had wine come into the room. Jackson had gone into the bathroom, and it turns out the boys took the wine upstairs into Jackson's bedroom, and then a few minutes later ran out the bedroom door, but they didn't have the wine, Rio Jackson said. He said that he went upstairs with his cousin and that the bottle of wine was open and a little bit was missing. But importantly, he said Michael Jackson didn't seem to be upset that the wine had been opened, and he knew that the accuser and the brother were up in that room.
And so we see again, Linda Kenny, this
times that the children were sneaking the alcohol. So, I mean, it's like someone coming to your house. You're not going to be able to look at them 24/7. You're going to hope that there is some honor system. You're going to hope that people that you have in your house have integrity and that they know how to act. And what we're seeing here coming out in court, open court, is that they did not know how to act. There was not a lot of integrity, and they did take advantage of the situation.
So we see the entire defense team, including the spokesperson, is on the same page. We're going to try and make the accuser and his family somewhat to blame for what may or may not have gone on. Let's go out to Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, I do want to talk to you, as I love to always, about celebrities in just a moment. But a quick question on this point of the accuser. What is the prosecution trying to do on cross-examination to rehabilitate the accuser when these kinds of allegations are made? Are they even approaching the issue, or are they just letting it go?
Well, a little bit. You know, they are trying to poke holes in the story, as I just described with Rio Jackson, trying to say, all right, what really happened? Let's drill down. Okay, turns out the boys didn't run out of the room with the wine. But I think that maybe they'll try to rehabilitate these witnesses more in their rebuttal case, try to have some character witnesses who will say something nice about these boys, considering we have heard some pretty horrific tales about them from a variety of witnesses, about them just being hellions, basically, at Neverland. So where the prosecution can, I think they try to poke holes in these stories that are coming out. But these aren't long cross-examinations. I mean, Rio Jackson was on the stand about 45 minutes this morning.
And there is Michael Jackson stepping out of the courtroom for just a moment as they take a break, and Raymond Bain, who's now become a bit of a celebrity herself, right behind him. Savannah, speaking of celebrities, we expected and still expect, I think, to see quite a few in the next several days. Now, if they rest, maybe we won't see some of the folks on the witness list. But who do we at the moment expect to see tomorrow, Friday, and maybe even Monday?
Well, I still think we're going to see Larry King tomorrow. Whether or not he'll be permitted to testify is another issue, but he is expected to come here, and that's been confirmed. I also expect Jay Leno. We hear he's going to come on Monday. The actor Chris Tucker, who was very close to the accuser and his family and may have something to say about these key events in February of March 2003, he is still expected to testify. As for that list of who's who in Hollywood, Smokey Robinson, Elizabeth Taylor, all the rest of them, not sure whether or not we'll be seeing them.
All right, well, we're going to have Savannah stand by because we're going to turn to Rabbi Boteach and revisit this issue of Michael Jackson's arrested development. Why don't you buy that theory that he's a kid at heart, he has some slumber parties, he maybe even engages in some activities that young boys do, that even in your book you suggest we should raise our sons differently, and maybe they should not, but looking at adult materials, etc. That seems like a plausible cycle. I know we're engaging in armchair psychology, but it certainly seems plausible to me.
In my opinion, Michael Jackson is in no way a product of arrested development. He and I discussed this for tens of hours ad nauseum. I wanted to know what he saw in children. I wanted to know the secret. And he was clear that he had not stopped growing up. He had chosen to be around the children's world because it was more innocent, because it was more creative, because he saw the adult world as utterly corrupt. I'll just give you one example. He once took me and my family to see Toy Story when it first came out, and he was sitting in the chair behind me, and he was laughing out loud. And I first said to myself, this is juvenile. I mean, this is a kid's thing. Fine, you take your kids. But why is he laughing? And then it began to grow on me. Wow, maybe Michael's more developed than I am. Maybe I need to see people shooting each other. Maybe I need to see adult situations on modern R-rated movies to be entertained. Maybe we adults, maybe Michael's right. So he had a philosophy here that the children's world should be consciously embraced. He never said it was a case of arrested development, and he's too profound on this subject, and I wish people could actually hear some of the things that he said to understand this is a man who had a philosophy behind being with kids. Now, that's why his arrest has destroyed it, because what it's done is made me feel like a dupe. Because, you know, I once loved this man, you have to understand, Jamie, not because he was famous, although I'm sure that was a part of it. I felt he made me be a better father. He used to say to me, Shmuley, did you tell your kids you love them today? I said, of course, Michael. He said, no, 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 no. Did you look them in the eye when you told them that you love them? He used to do things like that, and I'd say, you know what, Michael's making me prioritize my kids more because he's telling me that I need my children more than they need me. This is not arrested development, Jamie.
Well, and this is why we have you here, because we can't have Michael Jackson here, but you help us get inside this very complicated man. Let's jump back out to Savannah Guthrie, who I understand has an update.
There's a new witness on the stand. His name is Chris Robinson, and he's the interviewer who sat down with the Doe family for that rebuttal documentary. And he also wrote a list of questions for the Debbie Rowe interview for the rebuttal video. And he's just testified that there was no script for Debbie Rowe. Sure, there was a list of questions. He said, of course, there were a list of questions, but he said there was not a scripted set of answers for Debbie Rowe. And he's still in the middle of his testimony.
Linda Kenny, if the defense gets ready to rest, which is the report kicking around Santa Maria, what remains to be done? Mesereau got up before them, an opening statement up before the jury, and said you will hear from Michael Jackson. Now that can mean through other witnesses, through videotape, all of which he's presented. And he also said, I'm going to show you that this could not have occurred, well, as they say. So is he ready to rest? Has he done his job for this
when he feels like he's cut through and he's really hit on some of the prosecution's case, you're ready to rest. You change your case, as you know, as a defense attorney going into it, depending on what the prosecution does. But he can show that this didn't happen by showing the alleged victim, the accuser's credibility is terrible. I mean, Jamie, think about it. We're all having this discussion now that he's not going to get convicted, and it was different at the beginning of the trial.
Half a minute left. I want to finish up with Rabbi Boteach, because I do always like to get your words of wisdom and advice for Jackson and his defense team, because it seems to change. I mean, you're very open to change. This is one of the things that makes you a more interesting guest than most. Rabbi, what's your word of advice to Michael Jackson now? Should they call it a day, rest the case, and start putting his life back together?
They should absolutely rest. I mean, even the testimony, which is meant to exonerate him, like these two boys are out there masturbating at Neverland. I mean, Michael tried to cultivate an image that Neverland was this place for kids, and they're sitting there watching porn in his guest suites, masturbating. I think they won the case, and now there's an endgame strategy. This Raymond Bain is doing Michael phenomenal damage. She defends him too much. He should say Michael has learned a lot from this case. Michael wants to make changes in his life. He's not a molester, but he has done things which are clearly unacceptable. They should have an endgame strategy. Stop saying the man's a saint. Even if he's not a pedophile, he's not a saint. He still has to live with the American public, and they have to see that he learned something from this trial.
And I think actually one of the lessons we could all learn, Rabbi, is that our heroes are complicated, and rarely are they saints. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, I want to thank you so much, as I do every Wednesday, for joining us on our Michael Jackson special. Thanks, of course, to Savannah Guthrie, toiling away out there. I'm hoping we see you soon, Savannah, but who knows? We'll find out later today, perhaps, whether the defense will, in fact, rest. Thanks for your report today. And, of course, to Linda Kenny, my good friend.
Hey there, I'm Catherine Cryer. Thanks for joining us. Well, it looks like Michael Jackson's defense team might have decided to rethink its strategy. Court TV's Diane Diamond has learned Tom Mesereau and company could wrap up next week. All right, Diane, this may be a good thing for them to do. How does this bode for Jackson testifying?
Well, I have sources that say that the Tom Mesereau team has told the judge that they do plan to wrap up next week, that they have taken their 500-person list, squeezed it down to about 40 additional witnesses. We got through 5 today, and no mention made of whether or not Michael Jackson is going to testify. Jay Leno is still on the list, so is Larry King. There's some doubt about whether Larry King will actually testify. He might take the California Shield law and refuse to testify.
All right, when you say there's doubt, where's that coming from? Because certainly the Jackson people are saying he will testify.
No, I haven't heard it that unequivocal. Oh, you mean Larry King?
Yeah.
I thought you meant Michael Jackson. I'm sorry.
No. Sorry.
Yeah, they have talked about that, but there's confusion here in the court around this instance where Larry King was talking to Larry Feldman, the mother's attorney, in a restaurant, and a third person overheard it. The judge has indicated that that third person, Michael Wiener, the only one to have given a statement, probably will not be allowed to testify. That's been his tentative ruling. So if he doesn't testify, then it's all, the onus is all on Larry King, and I am hearing that he may choose not to take that whole burden on and in fact invoke the Shield Law.
All right, well, while we're on this subject, let's put up the graphic here so everybody knows exactly what the conversation was. This was the cross-examination of Larry Feldman. It said, you did have a meeting with Michael Wiener and Larry King, right? I've never had a meeting with Michael Wiener in my life. So approximately 9 months ago, you didn't meet with Mr. King and Mr. Wiener, correct? I absolutely have never had a meeting with Michael Wiener in my life. Okay? And did you ever tell Larry King that these allegations against Mr. Jackson are false? Absolutely not. Well, we're certainly understanding that that's the defense contention, that specifically Feldman said she was in it for the money. Now, whether or not that's saying that comparing this, he says allegations against Jackson are false. I didn't say that, but he may have said she wants money, right?
Well, Larry Feldman is a very well-respected jurist, not only here in California, but all across the country. And he sat on the witness stand here. I heard him. He said, I never said anything about a client. I would never break the confidentiality. I would never speak, at least of all, to a television person about a confidential matter. So, it may come down, if Larry King does testify, it may come down to Larry King's word against Larry Feldman's.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to talk about that's happened today, but I want to bring in the panel so we can mix it up on these various issues. With us, former prosecutor Lisa Pinto and criminal defense attorneys Gary Casimir and Joe Tacopina.
Idea that when there's money involved, and I think Michael Jackson and his team throughout has always said that this is about money. These people always come after me because they want money, and he's just continuing on with that theme. I don't think there's going to be any great revelation. It's not going to change anything one way or the other. I think Joe was right. There's always an indication that there's a lawsuit that's going to follow this case, whether Jackson gets acquitted or convicted here. That's going to happen. I don't care what anybody says. That's a definite. But I think it's important for the defense to at least keep that out there so that the jury always has it in its mind with regard to credibility, because the whole case rests on this kid's credibility.
Absolutely. Diane, what about going back to the testimony of Michael Jackson before we move on to some other things? I understand that Ramon Bain, the spokesperson we've seen much of for the Jacksons, one of them, is denying that a coach has been working with Michael Jackson. Is that rumor floating around?
It is indeed. There is a CBS report today that they have hired a coach to coach him on how best to be a witness. Now, Ramon Bain has said that that's not true. Just to a small group of reporters, she was indicating that she would come out after court today and actually make a statement to that effect. I'm not sure that she's actually done that. But again, my best information is they're going to wrap this up quickly. They have decided to toss out a lot of the character witnesses, because if you bring in character witnesses, then the state can bring in bad character witnesses, and the state is loaded for bear on that. They want to bring in everybody from LaToya Jackson to a domestic that used to work for Michael Jackson that kept a diary about his interactions with boys.
What about Bradley Miller? We were expecting certainly to hear from Bradley Miller.
Nope. I don't think Bradley Miller is coming here at all. I don't think that these children, the accuser's biological father, is coming. I don't think we'll hear anything about the alleged welfare fraud of this mother. They don't seem to have a witness to bring those documents in. I think there's a lot that we thought might come up that won't come up. And, some people think the shorter the defense, the better. So maybe that's Mesereau's thinking.
All right, one point before we get to them cutting off the case, which I think is probably pretty smart, as you were saying.
Good morning. I'm Len Cannon with the latest from the Court TV News Center. The defense wants to call CNN talk show and broadcasting legend Larry King to the witness stand today in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial. Joining us now live outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. And Savannah, before we get to King's testimony and your explanation of it, we want to let our viewers know that we have videotape of Michael Jackson. There he is, arriving just moments ago in the courthouse, once again surrounded by his mother on the right and the rest of the entourage. Now, tell us about what the Larry King testimony is going to be about today, Savannah.
Well, actually, Len, that's a huge question mark, and I can tell you that right before Michael Jackson arrived, Larry King arrived in similar fashion, and we have some video of that to show you. He came surrounded by a producer for his show, Larry King Live on CNN, and a lawyer by the name of Bert Fields, who actually represented none other than Michael Jackson in the 1993 case early on in that investigation. Larry King apparently is privy to a conversation that happened with Larry Feldman, who you may remember is the accuser's mother's lawyer. And Larry King, according to the defense, will say something to the effect of Larry Feldman told him that the mother was just in it for money and that the kid wasn't credible and that he didn't believe the family. I can tell you that Larry Feldman on the stand emphatically denied making any such a statement. Larry King, it's not entirely clear what he's going to say because nobody's really talked to him. Tom Mesereau's investigator has talked to Larry King's lawyer, but it seems that nobody's actually talked to Larry King. So what's going to happen this morning is there's going to be a hearing outside the presence of the jury, and the judge wants to hear exactly what it is that Larry King will say. And you're looking at a picture of him as he waits to go into that courtroom. It's just about time for court to get underway this morning here in Santa Maria.
So, Savannah, as I understand it, Larry King will tell the judge exactly what he said, then the judge will determine whether or not this is admissible to testify before the jury.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly, and you know, there are a couple of issues here, Len. Number one, it's potentially hearsay. If Larry King's saying, Larry Feldman told me what the accuser's mother said, that's actually double hearsay. Number two, it could be improper opinion. If it's just Larry Feldman's opinion that the family isn't credible, the judge has already indicated he would not be inclined to allow that into testimony. And number three, Larry King's a member of the media, as we all know, and therefore he's covered by the Reporter's Shield in California. He could actually potentially refuse to answer any questions about this if it's considered to be a part of his news gathering activities. That's also what this hearing this morning is all about.
Yeah, another slight twist and turn in the Michael Jackson trial. Why am I not surprised? Actor Chris Tucker's girlfriend may also take the stand today. What can we expect from Aja Pryor? What is she going to talk about?
Boy, she's a name we've heard a lot in this case. As you say, she was Chris Tucker's fiance. She spent a lot of time with the accuser's family, particularly the accuser's mother, during the key events. And we can glean from questions that were asked of the accuser's mother when she was on the stand what her testimony might be today. For one thing, Aja Pryor was present when the family interviewed with child welfare workers in Los Angeles. She was there initially when the workers came to that meeting. Also, Jane Doe, the accuser's mother, was asked whether she'd made a series of statements to Aja Pryor, such as complaining that they had no money, complaining that they had no car, telling Aja Pryor that she was upset because Michael Jackson's people were keeping her away from Michael Jackson and she wanted to be closer to Michael Jackson. She was also asked, the mother was, whether she told Aja Pryor that she was supposed to go to Brazil with Michael Jackson, and then when she learned that Michael Jackson wasn't going to Brazil, she no longer wanted to go. Aja Pryor also evidently loaned or gave some money to the accuser's mother. So the bottom line for her testimony probably is more along this theme that the accuser's mother constantly had her hand out to celebrities and people who were close to celebrities, and that was part of her modus operandi.
Yeah, the jury has a long list of people to go over when they actually start to deliberate about the mother and whether or not she's greedy. The judge ruled yesterday on whether prosecutors will be able to discuss character issues. We'll talk about this ruling.
This is very important to the prosecutors. You know, the defense has brought on a few witnesses who've said things like Michael Jackson has never behaved inappropriately with any child. And the prosecution had argued that they had really opened the door to character evidence because they had brought in evidence of Jackson's good character. Then the prosecutors argued they should be able to ask questions about Jackson's bad character. Specifically, they wanted to ask some of these witnesses about all of the details of that 1993 case, the allegations that Jordy Chandler made. They wanted to ask about a statement that LaToya Jackson, Michael Jackson's sister, made that a little boy was paid off to the tune of $1 million to buy silence. Well, the judge issued a ruling yesterday. He said the defense has not opened the door to character evidence. All the defense is doing is trying to defend against this 1108 prior sex offenses evidence, which they are clearly entitled to do. The judge said they haven't opened the door, so prosecution, you do not get to ask these very explosive questions of the defense witnesses.
Got it. Thanks for buttoning that up for us. Savannah Guthrie reporting live from Santa Maria, California. Thank you. And of course, stay tuned to Court TV. We will...
instead of asking questions, the defense wanted talk show host Larry King to answer them, but the judge has ruled that the talk show host will not take the witness stand inside that Santa Maria courthouse. Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. The King of Pop's defense case continues inside the courthouse, but without the help of the King of Talk. Joining us now with the latest is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, I want to get in just a moment to the issue of the judge's ruling and why he ruled the way he did, but it's not going to make any sense unless you tell us first what the defense wanted Larry King to say.
Yeah, and you know, Jamie, this is the first time we've really heard it from the horse's mouth, from Larry King himself. He says he had a meeting with Larry Feldman, who was the civil attorney for the accuser's family, at a deli in Beverly Hills, and he says that Larry Feldman told him that he thought the accuser's mother was a wacko, that's a direct quote, and that in Larry Feldman's opinion, she was in it for the money. And Larry Feldman told Larry King, I'm not going to take this case. He said that he had talked to the authorities, told them about the case, told them about the mother, but that Larry Feldman wanted nothing to do with the case.
Now, Savannah, it's a small world, but can you give us the context for why Larry Feldman and Larry King were even in the same room talking about Michael Jackson and the accuser's mother?
It's interesting. Apparently, Larry King eats breakfast here at this deli every morning, and they invited Larry Feldman. There were other show producers there and a publisher by the name of Michael Wiener, and the purpose was to get Larry Feldman to become a regular panelist on the Larry King Show for the Michael Jackson trial. Ultimately, that never went anywhere, but that was the purpose of the meeting.
So, Savannah, the judge, even though Larry King showed up and did what he had to do, he came to that courthouse as asked, the judge said he's not going to take the stand. Why not?
Well, it's very complicated, but let me just bottom line it for you. When Larry King came in and testified to the judge, but not in front of the jury, he said it was Larry Feldman's opinion that the mother was in it for money. It was Larry Feldman's opinion that she was a wacko. Larry Feldman did not say that the accuser's mother had told him anything. He did not reveal any confidential communications between the mother and her lawyer, Larry Feldman. The defense wanted to bring this in, and they were arguing this impeaches Larry Feldman, because on the stand, Larry Feldman said, I can tell you I didn't tell Larry King and I didn't tell anybody about anything that anybody tells me, because that is privileged. It would be absolutely improper, and if anybody says that, that person is lying. Therefore, it wasn't impeachment of what Larry Feldman said, because he did not reveal confidential communications. Rather, he was just expressing his own opinion about the veracity of this case.
It is complicated, Savannah, but you certainly explained it clearly right there for all of us. And I guess the question now that I have, whether or not this is going to be a surprise for the defense. I mean, were they really counting on Larry King? Are they ready to go forward with other witnesses? Or did they realize that there was a good chance that this man would not be permitted to take the stand, the King of Talk?
You know, they are ready with other witnesses. I don't think it will come as a terrible surprise, because there were multiple problems with this proposed testimony. Not only did you have this issue of whether it really impeaches Larry Feldman, it's also potentially improper opinion for Larry Feldman to bring this in as him, you know, vouching or not vouching for the credibility of the accuser. It's also hearsay upon hearsay. Also, Larry Feldman is covered by the Reporters' Shield in California. So I think there were a lot of reasons why this testimony might not have come in, and clearly the defense would be well aware of those issues.
All right, Reporters' Shield, of course, one of our favorite subjects. Speaking of reporters, we are joined
for the defense side. So I'm going to say next week. Next week or directly after Memorial Day.
Well, you are the one I go with, Diane, when I hear competing information on different networks. And by the way, speaking of other networks, there was a report, confirmation, Michael Jackson will not testify. What do you think?
Well, yeah, but that same network that I won't name because I have a lot of friends there.
Me too.
The week before had this big exclusive that, you know, Michael Jackson will testify. Here's the bottom line. Yeah, they sure did. One week it was big exclusive. He's going to testify. Big exclusive now. He's not going to testify.
Well, they're covering all their bases.
The bottom line is okay, let's leave that at that. The bottom line is I don't think the decision has really been made. You know, maybe they're leaning toward no, maybe they're leaning toward yes. I think he probably won't take the stand because logically it doesn't make good sense to pit him against Tom Sneddon in this courtroom. but I don't think that they've really decided yet.
You know, I am far more cynical than you, Diane. I think the decision was made long ago that Michael Jackson would not testify because he was such a poor witness back in 2002, because he would be subjected to such rigorous cross-examination, especially after the prior bad acts evidence was allowed to come in and did come in, and that would open Jackson up to cross-examination on those cases as well. Perhaps we will never know, since these are decisions that are made behind closed doors between attorney and client. Diane, I want to make sure I ask you about the cross-examination of Aja Pryor, the witness who was on the stand today. We heard about her direct on our report a little while ago, but what about her cross-examination?
It was done by the district attorney, Tom Sneddon, very gentle questioning as to what she really thought of this family. Tom Mesereau had taken her through all the negatives about the family, and the cross was very short, really. This was a family that was very, according to Aja Pryor, very demonstrative. The first time you meet them, they hug you, and they love the fact that she called them her little Mexican brothers and sisters, and she was especially close to the accuser's older sister, about 16 years old at the time. She was invited to graduation ceremonies for her Explorers class. That's a police academy class. She invited them to family weddings along with Chris Tucker, her boyfriend, father of her child. It seemed to me a very caring and loving relationship as she described it on cross. On direct, I should tell you, when she started to talk about what was your relationship with this family? What did you have in common with this mother, who's not even a high school graduate and, you know, of a different race, lives in a completely different neighborhood? She started to cry, and she said, you know, what we had in common was our deep love for her children. I'm a mother. I knew that boy was sick. I mean, she was so poised and so beautiful on the stand, and I got the feeling that she, to this day, really wishes she knew where she could get in touch with them, because she misses talking to at least the children and the mother as well. But I think toward the end, the mother was so frantic and calling her all the time, yet never ever telling her she needed to escape or be rescued, that I think it was maybe a bit of a relief on that score. But this is a woman who really misses those kids.
She sounds like, Diane, a very compassionate and caring woman, a woman who really bonded with these kids. And yet, was she the one who called the mom a wacko on the stand today?
No, that was Larry King, quoting Larry Feldman, the attorney, as calling the mother wacko.
What did she say about the mother? Did she have a good relationship with the mother?
She said that she first met the children with the father, and it wasn't until much later she met the mother. The mother was busy working all the time, apparently, at that time. But she did like them. And when Chris Tucker promised that her old car would go to this family, she was glad to do that. But she didn't want to give the car away till she got the new Mercedes she was going to get. She liked going places with them. When this mother called her and said, you know, I have the Child Protective Services coming. I'm really worried. You know, they saw that Bashir documentary. They're coming to question me. This is the woman she called. Aja Pryor brought her little infant son with her and came over. And there was a video, an audio tape made of the first few moments of that, where the social workers say to her, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave. And Aja Pryor says, I'm here to support my family. You know, I want to be here. And they said, well, we don't really care what you want. You got to leave. So I think that she did have a good, warm, loving relationship. It wasn't every week. It wasn't all the time. But she was there for that family, as she put it.
You know, it's so striking to me, Steve Mandel, that this family, and particularly the three kids, the accuser and his brother and his sister,
clock seemed to be working.
Haven't they seen a lot of video through the Bashir documentary and others of Neverland? Why are they watching more?
Boy. You know, it surprised some court watchers here when the judge allowed this in, because the state rose, Tom Sneddon himself, and he said, you know, Your Honor, I've seen this 19-minute tape. It's got propaganda in it. It's a fluff piece. It's got a chalkboard in the kitchen with the children's handwriting on it saying, we love you, Daddy, and pictures of Jackson with children, and a room full of fan mail with an prosecution symbol in the back. He said, I don't think the jury should see this. But you're right, Catherine. They have seen the Bashir documentary, the outtakes of Bashir. They saw a video that the young brother in this case made going all around Neverland. They saw another one where Michael's walking with the accuser on the beautiful grounds of Neverland. And now this one. I think the judge, as he said, I didn't allow the field trip out to Neverland, so I don't see any problem with this, so that the jury could get to know the landscape of where they say this crime happened.
Okay, well, I want to see what the panel has to say. CBS News.
She's in the Court TV News Center, and we go to her now.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Former Jackson attorney Mark Geragos was expected to return to the stand today in the Michael Jackson trial. Geragos testified last week that he once ordered surveillance of the accuser's family because he believed they were plotting to extort money from Jackson. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond. Diane, what can we expect from Geragos today?
Well, it all depends on what Judge Rodney Melville decides to do, Amanda. We don't know if he is going to allow the cross-examination of Geragos to continue. If you remember back to last week, he was here. He testified on direct. When he started cross, all of a sudden during a court break, he had actually seen the paper, the attorney-client waiver paper, and realized it was limited. So he came back into court and said, Your Honor, I cannot answer most of the rest of these cross-examination questions. So what does the judge do today? We don't know. He could strike all of his testimony and tell him, you know, go back to Los Angeles. He could possibly, as the state requested, fine the defense for this faux pas, if we could call it that. Or he could tell Mark Geragos, sit in the chair. I'm taking the date off this thing. It's not a limited waiver. It is a attorney-client waiver, period. You need to answer the questions. You know, Amanda, it struck me that there has been 1 week since Mark Geragos was here last to testify. That's 1 week in which the state was able to pour over what he's already testified to. Now, if there are any inconsistencies and they are allowed to continue cross-examination, you can bet the state is loaded for bear against Mark Geragos. Why, they may even bring up that day that Mark Geragos was with Michael Jackson, the day that he was arrested and surrendered in that hangar in Santa Barbara at that small airport there. And that was the day, if you remember, Amanda, on which Michael Jackson claimed his shoulder was dislocated. He got a big bruise on his right forearm, and he had been the victim of police brutality. Of course, a special attorney general's investigation of that proved or concluded that there was no evidence that that ever happened.
That seems like such a long time ago, Diane, when you just mentioned that. I remember that very well, those alleged injuries. Also returning to the stand today is videographer Lawrence Nimmer. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Lawrence Nimmer is a very interesting man from this region. He has a company that does videos for lawsuits. So if you have a slip and fall case and you are permanently disabled, he does day in the life videos of these people. He did 2 videos for the defense. One cataloging what the alarm bell sounds like outside Michael Jackson's bedroom. And the jury got an eye view of what that would sound like from the downstairs part of Michael Jackson's bedroom to the upstairs part where the bed actually is, where frankly I could hardly hear the chime at all. But on cross-examination it was made clear that he never did any decibel counts. He never really measured anything. It was just, you know, turn the camera on and have a maid walk through and trigger the alarm. The second video he did was of the Neverland property that you just saw there. He went in and for 19 minutes, it's edited down of course, he showed the bronze statues of children. He showed the library, the books, the grandeur, if you will, of Neverland for the jury to see. The judge, after an argument, decided to allow it in. He said, I didn't allow the field trip to go on for them, so I will allow them to see this 19-minute video. The state was angry about that because in the video, the camera lingers on these huge portraits of Michael Jackson, very stylized portraits, looking very happy, surrounded by happy children. They showed a room full of his fan mail with an anti-prosecution notice there, and they even zeroed in on the chalkboard in the Neverland kitchen where it's written, Daddy, we love you very much, get well, reminding the jurors here that he is a father with 3 kids at home.
Interesting video that we won't see, but you will, Diane. Finally, the defense has called more than 30 witnesses so far. Stepping back and taking a look at the defense case so far, how successful do you think that they've been in defending Michael Jackson?
Well, you know, it depends on which side you're looking at it. You know, the defense will say that they got in some very strong points, and they did. But on analysis, I have to tell you, many of the witnesses that they have called have also made points for the state. Specifically, the two young men, Wade Robson and Brett Barnes, their mothers, their sisters, who came here to testify on Michael Jackson's behalf, but in the end had to admit, yes, we slept with Michael Jackson in beds for as many as 365 days, and that was kind of devastating for the defense. Even down to Aja Pryor yesterday, this beautiful ex-girlfriend, I guess she's ex-girlfriend of Chris Tucker, came in to testify that she was friendly with the mother in this case during February and March of 2003, talked to her all the time on the phone, but she never cried out for help. She never said, "I'm being held against my will." The state made points with her too, though. She cried about loving this family and loving these children, and asked, did the mother ever ask you for money? No. Did she ever ask you to buy her anything? No. And that was bad for the defense. So many of their witnesses have not been good, haven't been entirely defense witnesses. The state has turned them as their own. In fact, Raymond Bain, Michael Jackson's press secretary, addressed that yesterday. Give a listen.
Some of it has been mean, and there have been a lot of accusations to come out of regarding Mr. Jackson that are not true. And he's looking for the day to vindicate himself. Yes, there has been some damaging accusations made. I mean, we'd be idiots if we said otherwise. But, I mean, we're looking beyond that, and his defense is pretty much arguing its case, and we feel that and hope that when this is over and the jury goes back, they will find him innocent.
So.
Well, today the judge is expected to straighten it all out, and Geragos should then return to the witness stand. So joining us now from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse to help us understand all of this, as she always does, is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, good morning to you. So let's start off setting the stage here. Again, for viewers who might not be familiar with the legal wrangling or might just be joining us, first of all, Mark Geragos, who is he and why is he being brought to this courtroom?
Well, Mark Geragos is Michael Jackson's former attorney. He represented him from about February, March of 2003 through Michael Jackson's arrest into April of 2004, which was around the time the grand jury convened. And he was called by the defense for one simple reason. Mark Geragos is the one who can explain why there was surveillance done of Jane Doe, the accuser's mother, and her family. He said on the stand last week, I'm the one who ordered it. I hired a private investigator, and I said, find out everything you can about this family and find out what they're doing. So they're laying the blame at Mark Geragos' feet for this surveillance rather than what the prosecutors think, which is something more nefarious, Jackson and the co-conspirators following this family around with a camera.
Now, Savannah, I mentioned that there was a problem during his testimony last week. The judge is going to have to make some determinations here about the extent of his testimony. We're watching now as Mark Geragos live approaching the entrance to the courthouse, so he is indeed there, as we fully anticipated. Give us again a capsulization, if you would, of what the problem was and what sort of decisions Judge Melville is going to have to make here.
Well, the issue has to do with the attorney-client privilege. As everybody knows, those communications you have with your lawyer are secret, and the lawyer cannot reveal them unless the client waives the attorney-client privilege. When Mark Geragos got on the stand to testify, Tom Mesereau, Jackson's current defense lawyer, said that Geragos had waived the attorney-client privilege so that he could testify. But then when it came to cross-examination, it turned out that that waiver was limited. Mark Geragos said, no, I've now seen the waiver, and it only goes up to the date of Michael Jackson's arrest in November 2003. Well, the judge said, I didn't know that. The prosecutor said, I didn't know that, and he wants to go much further than that. So now the judge said, all right, let's wait a minute. Everybody's got to brief the issue. Can you even do a limited waiver? Well, that's the question that will be decided this morning when everybody comes to the courthouse.
Can you even do a limited waiver? Well, I thought you couldn't, but then they filed papers, the defense did, suggesting that maybe you can. Savannah, break it down for us a little bit. What exactly is each side arguing to Judge Melville?
Well, Jamie, this will shock you, but none of the sides agree on this. The prosecutors say you can't do a limited waiver, and the defense says, sure you can. Let me just read you a portion of their briefs. Everybody filed a brief, by the way, the prosecution, the defense, and Mark Geragos, so everybody's had their say. Let me read you from the People, the state of California's motion. The quote is, the court should deny the defendant's late assertion of limited waiver. There is either a full waiver or no waiver at all. That's the old all or nothing argument. And the defense sees it differently, of course. And let me read you a portion of that. The defense says, it is not necessary to fashion any other remedy other than to simply proceed with cross-examination within the scope of direct and limit the waiver as stated. The defense has argued essentially, look, Michael Jackson would not have waived his entire attorney-client privilege, and in order to do that, it has to be knowing, intelligent, voluntary. He's really got to have a good grasp on what he's giving up, and you can't just say, oh, he impliedly waived it because he called his lawyer to testify.
You know, something Savannah just said, Jack, is very fascinating. I've been focused on this waiver issue, but there's another issue, the scope of the direct examination. Maybe the judge never has to get to waiver. Is the prosecution permitted, Jack, to ask questions beyond those which Mesereau asked on direct?
Yeah, and that's an easy way for the judge to resolve this. Again, so the folks out there understand.
Day and abductions and shockwave.
Running. He's not hiding. He came back immediately when informed about these charges, and he is as irate as I am and everybody else who knows anything about the history of these accusers. Anybody who knows anything about the history of the investigators and the axes they have to grind knows that these charges not only are categorically untrue, but they're driven by two things, money and revenge.
Well, that is the now famous attorney Mark Geragos, back when he represented, oh, maybe the biggest celebrity of them all, Michael Jackson. Now Geragos is back in Jackson's life, but not as the singer's attorney, as a witness for the defense. Welcome back to our special report on the Jackson case. Never a dull moment. I'm Jamie Floyd along with Jack Ford. We're going to go right back out to Savannah Guthrie because you were there in Santa Maria. Mark Geragos has already been on the witness stand in this case. This is a stop down, as you reported at the top of this special report. So the jury's heard from him. What has he told the jury already?
Well, Mark Geragos has brought that zeal for his client into the courtroom as a witness, and it's clear that Mark Geragos thinks there's a victim in this case, and it's none other than Michael Jackson. Here's a little bit more about his direct testimony. Testifying for the defense, Jackson's former lawyer, Mark Geragos, told the court of his brief role representing the King of Pop. He testified, at that time there were allegations being made in the media and also complaints being made to protective services about his fitness as a parent. There were people making all kinds of accusations about Michael. Geragos said he became concerned about the accuser and his family. He said, I was told about the Does. I remember seeing John Doe at Neverland. The things that I was hearing about the Does gave me great pause. Somebody had told me a story about John Doe being told to refer to Michael as Daddy, and Michael was uncomfortable with that. That gave me great pause. When Geragos unearthed the lawsuit brought by the accuser's family against JCPenney, he hired private investigator Bradley Miller. He told the court, I told him at one point I wanted to know where they were and what they were doing and who they were dealing with. Geragos was then asked about his role in placing items belonging to the accuser's family in storage. Tom Mesereau asked, did you have anything to do with the storage of Jane Doe's possessions? Answer, I told Brad at one point, if you're going to do this, film it so that you don't later get accused of taking something. Question, and did you have any understanding as to why Brad was going to store that material? Answer, I believe it was because he was trying to remain in the good graces to get whatever information he could as to what they were up to. Geragos also testified about the Doe family's passports and a possible trip to Brazil. Question, during the time you represented Michael Jackson, did you ever do anything involving a potential trip to Brazil with the Does? Answer, I didn't do anything involving a potential trip to Brazil with the Does. Question, did you ever learn anything about such a trip? Answer, I did, yes. Question, when did you learn that? Answer, sometime after Michael was arrested. Question, okay, and at some point, did you ever have possession of passports of the Does? Answer, yes. Finally, Geragos was asked if he was involved in any wrongdoing. Question: were you ever part of any conspiracy to commit any crime against the Does? Answer: absolutely not. I was trying to prevent a crime against my client. Question: and what crime was that? Answer: I thought that they were going to shake him down. So it's clear enough where the defense is going with this. They want to put a stamp of legitimacy on some of the activities that went on in February and March of 2003, namely that surveillance. Hey, it's Mark Geragos, a well-known lawyer, who ordered it. So can it really be that bad, Jamie?
They want to put in the jury's mind some, but not all of what went down. And that's when everything sort of came, as Jack said, to a screeching halt. What exactly was it that inspired the current controversy? When was it that Geragos said, hey, wait a minute, I'm confused. Am I supposed to be testifying now?
Well, there had been the break, and apparently there we saw he got the waiver. Then it was time for cross-examination. It really had just started, just a couple of minutes, and the prosecutor asked Mark Geragos, so did you do any investigation into the 1993 case? And at that point, Geragos said, well, to answer that, I'd have to go beyond the waiver. So let's read you a portion of the transcript so we can all remember. The witness, Mark Geragos, said, over the break, I was given the written waiver. The written waiver was up through the time of arrest. So to answer that, I would have to go beyond that. The court said, I didn't understand that the waiver was limited. Mr. Zonin, the prosecutor, said, nor did I. Tom Mesereau at that point says, yes, Your Honor, if I didn't say that, I meant to. We were going to limit it up until the time of Mr. Jackson's arrest. At that point, the judge, who was clearly irritated, sent the jury out and said, let's talk about it. Was not clear at all that this was a limited waiver. Judge Melville didn't know offhand if that was something that was even possible. The defense has argued essentially, look, it doesn't matter because the relevant time is before the arrest. Do we really need to go beyond that anyway?
Savannah, give us an idea of some of the options that Judge Melville could have here in order to resolve this dispute.
It seems to me he has three. He can strike Mark Geragos' testimony entirely, saying there hasn't been a waiver, so strike the direct, there'll be no cross, and Mark Geragos gets to go home early on a Friday. Or he could say, look, I find that there was a limited waiver, and so the cross-examination may proceed, but you can only confine the questions to the time period prior to Michael Jackson's arrest. Or he can say, look, it's all or nothing. It's a full waiver. When he waived it, he waived everything, and the cross-examination can go unfettered, and everything is not off limits.
Well, let's go back to Professor Jennifer Rosado for an analysis of some of these options here. All of this as we see the caravan that usually accompanies Michael Jackson as he arrives live outside the courthouse in Santa Maria. He is arriving now for the day, a day that we're told will probably be a shorter day. Originally, there was supposed to be no trial, no court scheduled today. It would have been a dark day inside the courtroom. But because of this issue surrounding Mark Geragos and his testimony, Judge Melville last Friday said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use this open day to resolve this. He ordered Mark Geragos back into the courtroom today. He is going to resolve whatever issues he has to resolve. And then depending upon what he does, they'll see where they go. So as now Michael Jackson arriving, as we see, let's go back to Professor Rosado for a moment. Let me ask you to analyze each of those three options that Savannah provided for us. First is that the judge could just say, you know what? He got on the stand. I was under a misimpression here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strike his testimony completely. He's gone. He doesn't take the stand. I'm going to tell the jurors, ignore anything he had to say. How likely do you think that is as a resolution?
I think that's probable. The first and second, I think, are the most probable then to allow everything in. I think the problem with striking the testimony is what we all as lawyers know is the problem, that the jury has already heard the testimony, at least from the direct side, and it's hard to have an instruction that says to disregard it. But that would be, I think, a clean way for the judge to deal with it. Now, to say
Michael Jackson says he didn't molest a 13-year-old boy and didn't conspire to falsely imprison the boy's family. Today, the singer's defense case continues inside a Santa Maria courthouse, and the jury could hear from relatives of another famous face, Marlon Brando, welcome back to Court TV's Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. Court is now underway, and joining us now with the latest is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, maids everywhere. Reminds me of one of my children's books that I read to my kids every night. What's the current maid saying? I feel like we've heard from enough of these maids already. Does she have something new to tell this jury?
Well, actually, Jamie, it's not deja vu. We have heard from this particular maid, Maria Gomez. She testified last Monday, and she's having a reprise here today of her testimony, but on a real specific issue. And that is this alarm that chimes when you walk into Michael Jackson's bedroom. We heard a test, a video that the defense put on last week that showed how the chime sounds, and I think that they were trying to express that it was a very loud chime and that anybody would hear it. And Maria Gomez was the person who actually walked in and triggered the chime. So she was sort of the model in this video, and she was called to the stand very briefly just to testify that she did this test. And what exactly did she do? She walked all the way out of Jackson's bedroom, then walked all the way back in, and that's why the alarm was triggered in the house.
And we know that this chime, this alarm, is a very key part of this case. Why is that, Savannah?
Well, you know, the defense is trying to suggest, as it has been from day one, that there's no way Michael Jackson wouldn't have heard that alarm go off and wouldn't have heard somebody approaching if he were in the act of molesting somebody. In fact, the accuser's brother says that, remember this, he actually witnessed Jackson in the act of molesting his brother, and that he walked up the stairs to Jackson's bedroom suite. And the defense's point is, look, that's impossible because Jackson definitely would have heard that alarm had anyone been approaching.
Just a quick procedural point. Why did the maid have to come back, Savannah? Why didn't they just take care of this issue when she was on the stand earlier?
Well, I think because they hadn't had their videographer on yet, so the issue hadn't really been crystallized. But the real interesting part about her testimony and this test that they do in the video is that the alarm sounds every time somebody comes in, but it doesn't seem to sound on the way out all the time. So it's kind of inconsistent, and the prosecution has had a field day with this because, you know, they'd like nothing more than for the jurors to be left with the impression that this alarm sounds sometimes but not other times. And so she was asked whether or not on all of these tests she did the exact same thing, and Maria Gomez said, yes, I did the exact same thing. It was the exact same test in and out. So that doesn't exactly explain why the alarm went off sometimes on the way out and sometimes didn't. It's a little bit confusing, but I think the prosecution feels it benefits from that confusion. The videographer who actually did the test couldn't explain why the alarm went off sometimes and why it didn't, but he pointed out it always went off when you were going inside the bedroom.
Well, the visual or sort of the image of this alarm is very compelling, and we recall, of course, that defense attorneys wanted that visit to Rockingham so that perhaps jurors could experience this alarm firsthand. The judge, of course, denied that. Savannah, I want to get to the alarm in just a minute with all of our guests, because I think it cuts both ways, as your report suggests. But let's talk briefly about yet another celebrity name that's on everyone's lips today. This one, Marlon Brando. We know very well that Mr. Brando will not be testifying. Even Thomas Mesereau can't pull that off since Mr. Brando passed away not too long ago. But his granddaughter, I think, is expected. Savannah, who is she and what could she possibly have to say?
Well, her name is Prudence Brando, and she's about 9 years old, and she was at Neverland a lot when the accuser and his brother and sister were there, and we believe she's going to be called to testify about what else, but the bad behavior of the Doe boys at Neverland, something we've heard a lot about. Miko Brando is her father. Marlon Brando is her grandfather. Miko Brando is a close associate of Michael Jackson's and, in fact, worked for Michael Jackson quite a bit. And we expect his wife, Karen Brando, also to take the stand about some interactions that she has had with Jane Doe, the accuser's mother. But the exact nature of their testimony, I'm not terribly sure about, so I guess we'll just have to wait and hear it firsthand.
We will grill you about the exact nature of the testimony as soon as it happens. Savannah, let me turn very quickly to Bob Honaker and ask you, I think this young girl, should she take the stand, may possibly be the youngest witness who testifies in this case. How do you cross-examine a 9-year-old kid?
Well, it's
Welcome back to Trial Heat. I'm Jamie Floyd. This is our special report on the Jackson case, and perhaps the only group of people that Americans like less than lawyers is reporters. I I'm very proud to be a member of both groups, as is, I'm sure, Savannah Guthrie, our correspondent in this case out in Santa Maria, California. And we expect later today a reporter to take the stand in this case, don't we, Savannah? And what will she say?
Actually, a reporter and an editor we expect to come on. They're from the El Monte newspaper. El Monte is this part of Los Angeles where the accuser's mother's parents lived. And she's going to testify about an article that she participated in, that she did on Jane Doe and about the accuser's cancer. But the real story that the defense wants to get out of her has to do with a little bit of largesse that the reporter offered to Jane Doe, feeling sympathy for the plight of this family. She says, apparently will say, that she brought a turkey, a Thanksgiving dinner, to the accuser's family, and that the accuser's family, the mother in particular, rebuffed it. Let's listen to, this is what the question was asked of the accuser's mother by Tom Mesereau. The cross was, do you recall her, the reporter, bringing a turkey? Answer, no, she didn't bring a turkey. Question, and did you ever complain to anyone at that newspaper that a turkey wasn't enough, you wanted, in effect, money? And Jane Doe answered, that is incorrect, but this was also mentioned in opening statements, and of course is an example of what the defense says is Jane Doe's obsession with getting money and using her son's cancer to get money from celebrities and basically anybody that would have any sympathy for the family.
And apparently the turkey was not enough, according to this witness, for the accuser's mother. And we don't always like to refer back to the prosecution's case. During the defense case, we like to be as fair as possible, but sometimes it is particularly relevant to go back and take a look at what was said by earlier witnesses, in this case, the accuser's mother. Now, more celebrities, Savannah. Jay Leno, we've talked about him almost from day one in this case. Do we expect, finally, to see him anytime soon?
Yes, well, he's on the docket for tomorrow, expected to come here and testify, although I don't think he'll be the first witness necessarily. We may have a couple of kids, the Casio kids, come in and testify first, but Jay Leno is supposed to come here tomorrow.
And the Casio kids, of course, children of one of the unindicted co-conspirators. One thing I love about courtrooms is that you get in there and you wait your turn. It doesn't matter who you are, celebrity or not, you wait your turn on that witness list. What do we think that Jay Leno, when he finally does take that stand, will have to say to the jury? Do we have any sense from the defense why they're calling Jay Leno?
We do, from the defense opening statement, and you're absolutely right. We've been talking about Jay Leno since day one because the defense has been talking about him since day one. Let me read you a portion of the defense opening statement. This is Tom Mesereau on this topic. He said, we are going to bring in witnesses to tell you about their behavior. For example, the accuser's mother and the accuser called comedian Jay Leno and tried to get money from Mr. Leno. Mr. Leno has told the Santa Barbara police something was wrong. They were looking for a mark. It sounded scripted. The mother was in the background, and I terminated the conversation. According to the defense, Leno really got suspicious because the accuser was on the phone saying, oh, you're my favorite, I love you so much, and he could hear the mother in the background kind of egging the boy on, tell him how much you love him, that kind of thing. Just so you know, the accuser himself was asked about this on cross-examination and flat denied ever speaking to Jay Leno. He did say he tried to call Leno once and left a message on the answering machine, but he said in no uncertain terms he never spoke to Jay Leno.
Well, let me then ask a prosecutor. I love having a prosecutor to ask these questions. I asked you before, how do you...
He is the editor of the El Monte Valley, or Mid-Valley News, I think. It's a small newspaper in the accuser's hometown of El Monte. I think she's on the stand to testify about a story that she did about the cancer patient. And I think that she will allege that when they did this story on the young boy, the mother asked that they put a bank account number in the story so she could get donations directly to the bank account, and this woman refused to do that for her. When her reporter, an elderly woman, came back, as the story goes anyway, came back to the house around Thanksgiving time to, see if there was an update or gather more facts. She presented the family with a turkey, and the mother is alleged to have said, I don't want the turkey, I want money. So sort of like what the sister-in-law just testified to, I don't want blood, I want money. It's a running theme today, Nancy.
Very quickly to Ann Bremner. Ann, I don't think I would even cross-examine her. I would let her say her turkey statement and get off the stand.
Exactly. I mean, I'd be done with her next witness.
And very quickly to Diane. Diane, I know we're running out of time, but what comes next?
Well, I just saw little 9-year-old Prudence Brando come in. This is Marlon Brando's granddaughter. It's the daughter of Miko Brando, Michael Jackson's longtime friend. And her mother is here, Karen. And I think that they are here, if my sources are correct, to say negative things about the way the Doe children acted when they were at Neverland. And I think Karen Brando is here to testify about some negative things that she either saw or heard from the mother, from Jane Doe.
So what is it about the boys? They crashed a golf cart?
Yes, exactly. And if my memory, I was talking with Savannah about this earlier, if my memory serves me, Shane Brando, Prudence's brother, was involved in a accident with one of the golf carts out there. We saw the accident report up on the big screen a few weeks ago. I forget who the person was, but he ran over somebody's foot with one of the golf carts. So
Diane,
it's not just
I
the
know
Doe
you hear
boys
me
that
laughing.
misbehave.
I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because I remember the first time I got in my parents' car without them in it. I ran straight into a tree, and it tore. It tore the metal strip down the side of the car off. And I tried to stick it back on there.
Yeah,
and then drove back and went,
a little crazy glue,
nothing
right?
happened.
It never works.
And, yeah, and I'm just thinking, what the heck does this have to do with anything?
Well, it goes to the what the defense says is the very disruptive, belligerent behavior of these boys, which I guess they're hoping the jury will translate into they can be lying about their whole story.
Because they crashed a golf cart.
Yeah.
Okay, Ann Bremner, what's the connection? I don't really see a credibility issue there.
No, I don't either.
Michael Jackson makes his way to court in day 5,900, no, just day 58 of the child molestation trial against him. Just seems longer. But Jackson may not be the only brush with celebrity that the jury may have, as relatives of the late actor Marlon Brando are now slated to take the stand. Welcome back to Closing Arguments and a special report on the Michael Jackson case. I'm Lisa Bloom. Right now we are live in Santa Maria as the defense pressed forward with its case in chief. You know, I remember there was a Brando connection in the Robert Blake case. Remember that? Christian Brando? Well, in this case as well, this is a live shot of Michael Jackson leaving the court with the umbrella up as usual, walking slowly but looking relatively comfortable as he makes his way to the limo surrounded by his bodyguards, and that's Tom Mesereau with the long right hair on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's go straight out to Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond. Now, we've been hearing throughout this trial from the defense that the mother of the accuser is a welfare cheat and a grifter. What did we learn about that today?
Well, not so much on the grifting, but a lot on the welfare cheating. We had 5 witnesses here today. It's, by the way, day 58, if you're really counting
not
there, Lisa.
5,942?
Not 5,900. No, just day 50. It just seems like day 5,000.
Maybe.
Whatever. Anyway, we had 5 witnesses today, 4 of whom were used by Tom Mesereau and the defense team to paint this mother in a negative light. There was a forensic accountant. He came in and showed her bank accounts and these trust funds that she had set up with this JCPenney money and some of the money she set aside for herself to use. Then we had a welfare eligibility officer who bluntly put, said, showed in effect that this woman did indeed cheat on getting welfare when she had all this other money and help from her boyfriend on the side. We heard from her, the mother's ex-sister-in-law, and boy, you could tell immediately there was no love lost there. This sister said she had not spoken to her brother or her sister-in-law in 15 years, but she'd heard that her nephew was ill, so she tried to have a couple of blood drives. She got an angry call from Jane Doe, the mother, saying, in effect, I won't repeat the expletive, but I don't want your blood. What I need is money. And then on the stand, finally, last but not least today, leaving the Brando people hanging, by the way, I guess till tomorrow, Connie Keenan, and she's the editor of a newspaper that ran an article on the cancer patient and how fragile he was and how much help the family needed. And then the editor said that the mother was not satisfied with that, came back and said, I need a second article because that one didn't earn me enough money.
You know, Diane, let's go back to the JCPenney's case because we've heard it's about
got $32,000. We saw pictures of her after that incident with the security guards, and she was pretty badly beaten. She got $32,000. Now, we saw a check for $29,000, a cashier's check she took out to give to Hollywood Ford to buy a car, but we know that she didn't buy that car. So we are suspecting that she took that check back, got the cash, and I'm thinking this is where the tummy tuck and the breast augmentation surgery came in, but nobody's really said whatever happened to that $29,000.
And you know, Diane, the implication is strong in this trial that because she didn't write down on the welfare form, I got 32 grand from a personal injury settlement, that she got welfare money that she was not entitled to. But do we know for a fact that she would have not been entitled to that welfare money if she had put that on the form honestly?
Yes, we do know today because this welfare eligibility officer said, no, we should have known that. She might still have been eligible for welfare, but not as much as she was getting. How much was she getting? $769 a month.
It would have reduced her payments?
She'd had some disability of $104 a month for a bad foot surgery. Yes, we got the implication that it would have reduced her eligibility, but that she probably still would have been eligible, just not for as much.
Okay, that's interesting to me because I know as a matter of domestic relations law, for example, money that she got as a personal injury settlement would not be divided up in a divorce, for example. So I don't know how it would get handled in the welfare context. And unfortunately,
Forensic Files, and at 10, unbelievable tales of globe-trotting thieves on 2 back-to-back episodes of Masterminds.
And we'll be heading right back into that courtroom live in Miami, Florida in just a few moments. But first, it's time for us to get a look at the latest news of the day. And for that, we go to Amanda Grove in the Court TV News Center.
Hello again. I'm Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Tonight Show host Jay Leno has arrived and is now inside the Santa Maria courthouse as he prepares to take the stand for the defense in the child molestation trial. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, I just want to let our viewers know first that Michael Jackson has also arrived, but let's get to what we expect from Jay Leno today.
Lots of celebrities we may expect today, and as you say, Jay Leno is here, and you got to look closely at this video as he walked up to the courthouse all by himself, no entourage. He shook the hands of the court officers who frankly looked delighted to meet Jay Leno as he walked in, to a lot of cheers from the fans. Jay Leno is expected to testify about a conversation he says he had with the accuser in this case. He's told sheriff's authorities that the accuser called him and was telling him how much he loved him and how great he was, and apparently Leno got very suspicious because he says he could hear the accuser's mother in the background kind of prodding the boy on, you know, tell him more how great you think he is. And Leno's words to the police, according to the defense, were, I thought they were looking for a mark. Clearly, the defense wants to bring this in as an example of a pattern on behalf of the accuser and his family to go after celebrities for their money. In the defense opening statements, Tom Mesereau said, you know, Jay Leno didn't fall for it, but unfortunately Michael Jackson did. I should tell you on the stand that the accuser denied ever having a conversation with Jay Leno, but he said he was one of his favorite comedians and he tried to reach him, but he said all he got was an answering machine, and he flat denied ever having a conversation with Jay Leno. So it really kind of sets up a credibility contest between Jay Leno, the beloved talk show host, on the one hand, and then the accuser on the other hand.
Absolutely, and that credibility is key for those jurors to decide who they believe in this case. Savannah, another celebrity. Talk about Chris Tucker's testimony.
Well, Chris Tucker's testimony, we're not exactly sure what it will be about, but, you know, he was very much in the thick of it with this family. He met them in 2000 when the accuser was sick and spent a lot of time with them and really seemed to take the family under his wing. We know from the opening statements that the defense feels that Chris Tucker was, quote unquote, hustled out of $2,000 by the family, so I think we'll hear about that. There's also been previous testimony in the case that Chris Tucker had offered his old car, or his fiance's old car, to the family, but because of logistical reasons and paperwork reasons, they had some trouble getting the car to them. And Aja Pryor, his ex-fiance, testified last week that Jane Doe and her daughter were hounding them about the car after they received this gift. They kept calling and calling and calling and saying, you know, where's the car? Where's the car? So he may have something to say about that. And he also was on that trip to Miami right when the Martin Bashir documentary was airing. It was Chris Tucker's private jet that the accuser and his family flew out on from California to Miami, so he was very much there when the Bashir documentary first aired and may have something to say about the behavior of not only Michael Jackson, but the people around him in the wake of the Bashir documentary.
And finally, Savannah, we're hearing different rumors about when the defense might rest his case and when this case might be over. What do you think about that? What are you hearing?
Well, you know, there are a couple of schools of thought. A lot of people are suggesting that today could be it, that the defense could rest as early as today, and that they have cut the fat from their witness list so much that we're really down to 2 witnesses, Jay Leno and Chris Tucker. I've also heard that there are some other witnesses still floating out there that may be called, although they could be quick witnesses. In particular, the Brando kids. The granddaughter of Marlon Brando was waiting around the courthouse yesterday, and some people think she still will be called today. There are a few witnesses out there that the defense could still call, but so to bottom line it for you, yes, it could be today that the defense rests, could be tomorrow. You never say never in the Michael Jackson trial. That's what 3 months of this trial will teach you. So, but I think it is safe to say that the defense will be resting earlier rather than later.
Well, that's a very diplomatic answer, Savannah. Thank you so much for that informative report. Savannah Guthrie, of course, reporting.
Heat in our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jack Ford. He makes a living cracking jokes, and recently, often, at Jackson's expense. But today, comedian Jay Leno has more serious business at hand, testifying, having been called to the stand by the defense. Joining us now from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, always nice to see you. So Jay Leno shows up at the courthouse, gets on the witness stand. Tell us what he had to say on direct examination.
Well, it was short and sweet. He was on the stand in total just about a half hour, and he testified that back in 2000, he thought, he received a few phone messages from the accuser in this case. He believes the accuser got the phone number from his friend, their mutual friend, Louise Palanker, a comedian who's testified in this case. Anyway, he said that he got a few calls from the accuser, and he said that he then called the accuser at the hospital and spoke to him, and he said the accuser sounded kind of groggy on the phone, and then he thought he talked to maybe the accuser's brother, and then he thought maybe he talked to the accuser's mother, but he couldn't be entirely sure about that in the hospital room. In particular, he said he was a little suspicious because some of these messages from the accuser that he got, he said the boy was overly effusive, especially for someone that young. Jay Leno said, you know, I get a lot of calls from little kids, or I do things for little kids. I speak to little kids a lot, especially sick kids. And he said, you know, most 12-year-old kids are sort of like, hey, oh, hi, how are you? I'm fine. And he said this kid was totally different. He was saying, like, you're my favorite, you're the best, you're the greatest comedian, I admire you, and he just sort of became a little suspicious about that. But in spite of that, he did actually call the accuser in the hospital, and he pointed out that after this happened, he still continued to get a few calls, and he actually asked Louise Palanker, you know, what's the deal with this kid? You know, the calls are kind of weird, sounds a little scripted, and he said Louise Palanker explained to him, well, that's just how he is, and he wants to be a comedian, so he writes down what he wants to say beforehand and then says it. In any event, Jay Leno asked Louise Palanker to make the call stop, and sure enough, she did.
And how about on cross-examination? Savannah, what did he have to say?
Well, you know, the prosecutors didn't have to do a lot on cross because actually on direct, Jay Leno was pretty clear that the accuser never asked him for money. He said, nobody ever asked me for anything. He also said he wasn't really sure if he had spoken to the mother. They said, is it possible you could have spoken to a nurse in the hospital? And he said, you know, I guess that's possible. I was under the impression that it was the mother. But it wasn't exactly what the defense had said in the opening statement. You know, the impression from the opening statement was that it was the accuser on the telephone, and then you could hear the mother in the background kind of urging him on, and that he terminated the conversation. And that wasn't exactly the picture we got of it on the stand today, so it was a pretty quick cross-examination. One thing that the prosecutors did do was say, you know, would it explain his effusiveness if you knew that he was enrolled in the comedy camp at the Laugh Factory, and that he, you know, you were one of his favorite comedians, and he loved comedians, and he aspired to be a comedian? And Jay Leno said, yeah, well, you know, that tends to explain it. That's what Louise Palanker explained to me, and I was fine with that.
So then let's talk about what this testimony wasn't then, and apparently differing a little bit from what a lot of people had anticipated coming from Jay Leno. We know that the defense has put some witnesses on the stand to talk about what they claim were the accuser's mother and her being involved in wanting only money. And again, to remind people, part of the defense's theory here is that this whole case is driven by the mother's desire to somehow get money from Michael Jackson. So bottom line then, Jay Leno did not say anything about anybody, the mother or the accuser here, soliciting money from him?
Yeah, in fact, he said, nobody asked me for anything. I'm sure of that, because if they had, I would have ended the conversation. What Tom Mesereau then did on redirect is basically kind of impeach him a little bit. He said, well, didn't you tell the police that you were suspicious and you thought they were looking for a mark? And he said, well, you know, I was a little suspicious, but no, they never asked me for anything. They never asked me for money. He said he was just suspicious because it just didn't seem like a normal child's behavior. He's talked to a lot of kids, and he even said, you know, I've talked to so many kids, some of this kind of runs in together, you know, so I can't really even be sure what he and I, the accuser and I, talked about on the phone. He kept saying groggy. I think the kid was groggy. You know, sometimes they are in the hospital. But the bottom line was we didn't have Jay Leno coming in here and saying that, oh yeah, the accuser had his hand out and was asking for money, or even that the mother was in the background saying, oh, go on, tell him how great he is. It was just that he sort of heard a woman's voice in the background. He thinks he spoke to the mother, but he said the mother didn't ask him for anything. But he did say he may have, you know, of his own volition or whatever, sent some hats and T-shirts and Tonight Show kind of stuff to the family after that. But, you know, the impression you got from the defense opening statement was this is going to be Jay Leno saying this is a family with the handout, they're looking for a mark, and I was deeply suspicious, and that's just not exactly what he said.
You know, Savannah, we mentioned that Jay Leno has gotten enormous mileage out of this in terms of his monologues on the show. As a matter of fact, we saw a tape of him just a few moments ago arriving at the courthouse. We're seeing him now apparently leaving the courthouse. And I just, as a matter of fact, just this morning saw a tape from a skit that he had done apparently, which was designed to be theoretically him arriving at the courthouse, showing up in a black SUV with an entourage and getting out dressed in his pajamas, obviously playing off of that day that Michael Jackson showed up that way. Once he ultimately got inside of the courtroom, talk about his demeanor on the stand, how he handled himself.
Well, not surprisingly, he was pretty charming on the stand. I mean, he definitely took it seriously. He didn't treat it like a stand-up routine, but maybe he just can't help himself. He did make a few jokes from time to time. For example, he said, you know, I do get a lot of calls. He said, it's actually kind of easy to get a hold of me. You'd be surprised. You can call me, and I say, this is Jay, and people say, no, it's not. And then I say, yes, it is. And he said, I guess I'm going to get a lot more calls after this, after today. Gee, thanks a lot. And the whole courtroom laughed. And then toward the end of his, at the very end of his testimony, when all the redirects and recrosses were over, he said, well, thank you very much. And then he said, Renee Zellweger is on the show tonight. And then the courtroom erupted in laughter. So he got a little mileage out of it, but more or less, I would say his demeanor was appropriate. You know, he wasn't treating it like a sideshow.
I think it was sort of interesting. Again, you've been out there the whole time, and you know that, you know, certain luminaries have been showing up, or sometimes certain wannabe luminaries have been showing up there. And oftentimes you see entourages, as we do see out in Hollywood. But I was struck by the fact that, as we saw on the tape, Jay Leno, a car pulled up, he gets out by himself and comes walking in, goes through security, and walks in the courtroom.
Me too, very much in keeping with his image as man of the people. It was just Jay Leno all by himself. And did you notice as he was walking up through, you know, towards the courthouse, he shook the hands of the court officers, and they looked delighted to meet him. And he came in, same thing at the metal detector. You know, he just seemed very like a regular guy, just kind of waltzing up to the courthouse. You know, he wasn't a real showboater. And you know, Larry King had a few people with him, but Jay Leno didn't. Came all by himself.
Now, Savannah, just to, again, to give a little more context to his testimony here, we know that the accuser, when he was on the stand, was asked specifically about Jay Leno. Tell us what he was asked and what he said, which would have been, at least in the minds of some people, the springboard for bringing Jay Leno into the courtroom himself as part of the defense case.
Well, the accuser, when he was on the stand, totally denied ever having a conversation with Jay Leno. I think I can read you a portion of his testimony on that. This was during cross-examination. The question was, and did you ever actually get Mr. Leno on the phone? Answer, no. Question, so you deny you've ever spoken to him on the phone, right? Answer, I've never spoken to Jay Leno. The accuser did say during his testimony that he had left a few messages for Jay Leno. What's interesting about this is, even though Jay Leno did testify that he did speak to the accuser, he was pretty sure that's exactly who it was, he kept saying, you know, kind of involuntarily, no one was pressing him for it, he kept saying, well, the kid was really groggy, the kid was groggy. And I thought to myself, well, I guess the prosecutors will argue that maybe the accuser didn't really even remember. You know, he's in the hospital, presumably drugged up, very, very ill. Nobody disputes that. Maybe he didn't remember talking to Jay Leno. I guess, you know, the prosecution now has an argument there, thanks to this defense witness. What's very interesting, though, and kind of telling, is that, you know, in all the grand jury and the prior interviews that the accuser did with the police, he never really mentioned the name Jay Leno in anything. You know, he talked about how he was asked, which celebrities would you like to meet when you were sick? And he named some names, Adam Sandler and, you know, a few other people, but he never mentioned Jay Leno. Then when he got on the stand at this trial, after Jay Leno became a huge name in defense opening statements, one of the first people he mentioned was Jay Leno. He said, oh, Jay Leno's one of my favorite comedians. They said, oh, did you ask to meet certain celebrities? Yes, Jay Leno, he said. And so Tom Mesereau asked him about that on cross, clearly feeling it was a little odd that suddenly Jay Leno is, at the forefront of the accuser's mind, the suggestion being that maybe he's watching the proceedings, keeping an eye on things, and trying to, I don't know, tailor his testimony to what he hears in the news.
All right, well, it's time for us to step away for a quick break. Savannah's going to stay with us. Our special report on Michael Jackson's case continues with the latest from that Santa Maria courthouse. As defense attorneys wind down their case, the question on everybody's minds now is, will they call Michael Jackson himself to the witness stand? We'll come back and talk about that. Stay with us.
Tonight.
Years ago, I allowed a family to visit and spend some time at Neverland. Neverland is my home. I allowed this family into my home because they told me their son was ill with cancer and needed my help. Through the years, I have helped thousands of children who were ill or in distress. These events have caused a nightmare for my family, my children, and me. I never intend to place myself in so vulnerable a position ever again. I love my community, and I have great faith in our justice system.
And Michael Jackson may have already spoken then to the public through the internet. The question is now, will the singer talk directly to the jury in his child molestation case? Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jack Ford. Throughout the trial, there have been differing reports about whether Jackson will testify in his own defense. As our chief investigative editor Diane Diamond reports, there's evidence to suggest that Jackson might not do so well under oath.
A woozy-looking Michael Jackson answering questions under oath in a 1993 deposition in Mexico.
Mr. Jackson, at the break, did you find it necessary to take a pain medication?
Do I find it necessary?
Did you, at the break, did you have to take a pain medication for your pain?
This videotaped deposition was taken in November '93, just days before Jackson announced he was canceling a concert tour and going into drug rehab. It was clear back then there was something wrong.
Mr. Jackson, would you spell your last name?
Jackson. And today, as Michael Jackson's defense team ponders whether to put him on the witness stand, there is still an indication that something is wrong.
Are you on medication, Michael?
Yes, I went to the doctor.
What kind of medication?
Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry, I can't.
Are you okay? You look hurt.
Well, very much hurt. Yeah. I'm in pain.
Defense attorney Tom Mesereau has a track record of putting his clients on the stand, but Michael Jackson is no regular client, and he has a track record of his own, a record of giggling and misbehaving while under oath. During a civil trial in 2002, Jackson appeared one day on crutches, claiming a foot injury from a spider bite. He also showed up wearing a surgical mask, which, when the judge ordered it removed, left jurors to see the ravages of his plastic surgery up close. In the end, Jackson lost that civil suit on a claim by concert promoter Marcel Avram that Jackson had not lived up to his promise to perform at 2 concerts on New Year's Eve in 1999.
Objection. Are we going to have objection? Have an objection.
Michael Jackson is a man used to doing what he wants, of being in charge, and there is a chance that he might insist he be allowed to testify at his child molestation trial. But before Tom Mesereau agrees to that, he might want to study this deposition appearance carefully.
Who was in the Jackson 5?
Marlon, Tito, Jackie, Jermaine, Randy. Yeah, that's it.
So let's go back out to Santa Maria and Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. And Savannah, ask you the question that, again, we have been contemplating since this trial began. Is any indication whatsoever, any guidance at all from the defense as to whether they may well put Michael Jackson on the stand?
well, nothing official, but, you know, we can read between the lines, which is what we do best out here sometimes. And, you know, it's our understanding that the defense is planning to rest very, very soon, as early as today. And if those stories are true, if those reports that we hear are true, then that would presume that Michael Jackson would not be among the witnesses, because you got to believe if he were to take the stand, he'd be on the stand for days. So that would be my best guess, that at this point it is not the defense's intention to call Michael Jackson to the stand. But, you know, every veteran defense lawyer will tell you that that's something they decide and consider all the time, and it's sort of a moving target in a case. So I never say never out here.
We know that the defense has pared down their potential witness list significantly. There were a number of other celebrity names on that list. Jay Leno has been in the courtroom today, as you said, and there was also an indication that Chris Tucker, the actor and comedian, may well be coming to testify. What more have we heard about that?
I hear that Chris Tucker, if he's not here at the courthouse now, he will be any minute, that he may well be called to the stand today. And Chris Tucker is somebody who was very closely associated with this family during the key time period and before. He really befriended this family and took them under his wing. The defense said in opening statements that Chris Tucker was hustled out of $2,000 by this family, so I'd expect some testimony about that. And then he also was there in Miami in February 2003 when the Bashir documentary aired, and you'll remember that Michael Jackson had the accuser and his whole family come to Miami for the purpose of shooting a press conference that never actually materialized. So Chris Tucker will have some firsthand knowledge about that time.
Do we know, Savannah, if Chris Tucker, and again, we're not sure when and if the defense is going to arrest in the next day or two, but do we know of any other potential witnesses that they could follow up with to use as, let's say, their last significant witnesses after Chris Tucker?
You know, the thinking really is that it'll be Chris Tucker, that's who they're planning to have the last witness, as the last witness. I mean, I've been hearing that for a long time, and I think that everything we're seeing here and hearing here tends to bear that out, that Chris Tucker will be the last witness. The question would be, will he be able to make it to the stand today, or will he be, you know, pushed back until tomorrow? They're kind of flying through witnesses this morning, actually, so far. We've had a few even since Jay Leno left the stand.
I'm going to come back to you in 1 second, Savannah, because I just want to get Christine Griller, our guest here, to weigh in on what you and I were just talking about, and that is the prospect of Michael Jackson taking the stand. Now, you and I were chatting before him.
Jury responding to all of this?
Well, they're listening intently. I mean, there is a feeling in the air that there is light at the end of this vast tunnel we've all been in, you know? In fact, the judge said as much today. He was doing a little sidebar housekeeping thing, and he said, I wasn't wasting time, ladies and gentlemen, and time is getting short, you know? So they are paying attention by virtue of the fact they're looking at the clock on the wall and the bell is about to ring. Remember that feeling in school?
Oh, yeah.
I found them particularly paying attention to this doctor that they had on the stand, Dr. Philip Esplin. He's very interesting. He was called by the defense, of course, to say that he disagrees with the state's expert on child abuse. He doesn't think there is anything such as child sexual accommodation syndrome when you're talking about boys. He said that was something that came up in the 80s about girls, incest victims. But you know, Nancy, when you get an expert witness, if you're good at cross-examination, you could almost make them your own. And District Attorney Ron Zonen did that with him. I thought he took him through a whole litany of things, mostly talking about false reporting with this witness today. And he said, isn't it true that kids, especially boys, offer up their stories of abuse piecemeal, and that they don't really like to talk about a male child doesn't like to talk about a male offender? And he said, well, that's right. He said, that's because of the stigma of homosexuality. And he said, yes, I think they learn that by about the 3rd grade, so they're very reticent to tell anything about what's happened with a male. Then he went through this long list. I won't bore you, but he started talking about grooming. And he said, well, doctor, you're the expert. Let's see, would grooming be something like an adult spending a lot of time with a child? Yes. Giving them a lot of gifts, expensive ones like, say, a watch or a fancy jacket? Yes. Spending a lot of fun time with them, or staying close with them, say in a bedroom, or even having them sleep in their own bed? Yes. Letting them stay up all night and do adult things like drinking and cursing? And the doctor said yes, yes, yes to all of that. And he said, you know, all of that, Mr. Zonen, could go to desensitize a child to sex. Now, I don't think that's why the defense called this witness today, but that's what he said.
You know, when you describe that, Diane, I feel like I'm on the front row in the courtroom. What else happened?
Well, I wish you could be here for it, Nancy. It was so interesting to hear Ron Zonen very gently but rapid fire take him through about, is it normal for kids to immediately report? No. Is it normal for 10 to 14-year-old boys to tell their parents? And he said, no, no. In fact, it's my experience that they go and tell a friend first. The parents are sometimes the very last people to know. And the big thing about why children over the age of, say, 10 don't come forward is that they just think they're not going to be believed, especially, as Ron Zonen was sure to underscore, especially if the person they said did something wrong to them is very trusted or very well respected in the community.
You know, it sounds to me, Diane, that the Q&A that you were describing, the cross-exam, totally turned the witness around. And you're right. When you come in loaded for bear on cross-exam, you can bring home a bear. And it sounds to me like the state reversed this witness and got a lot of testimony from the defense witness for the prosecution.
Yeah, you know, I was sitting there thinking, this man, by the way, makes $3,600 a day plus expenses if he leaves his home state of Arizona. So he's very well respected. He didn't come cheaply. But I was thinking, as I was sitting there, will they call their own expert witness in the rebuttal section? But by the time Ron Zonen was done, I thought, oh, they don't need to call their own witness now. They've made this witness say exactly what they needed the jury to hear.
Yeah, and that's so powerful to argue in closing statements when you summarize your evidence to the jury. I would always put it up in posters to give the double whammy. They hear it and they see it. The defense's own witness said 1, 2, 3, and 4 with me at the courthouse. Not only high-profile Seattle lawyer Ann Bremner, but Court TV's Diane Diamond. She's been following the Michael Jackson case since 1993. Stay with us.
Jackson has provided Jay Leno with plenty of material over the years. In fact, Leno managed to skirt around a court-ordered gag order by having other comedians tell Jackson jokes while the trial was going on. Boy, did I laugh at some of those. They were great. I don't know, Diane, let me introduce Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond. Welcome, Diane. Maybe they were cheering for you. I don't know. I shouldn't have thrown that in. Chris Tucker.
No, they don't cheer for me here.
Oh, of course they do. Well, we're all cheering here in New York, Diane. I hope you can hear it all the way out there in Santa Maria. Diane, Chris Tucker on the stand. What's he had to say?
Yeah, he was the 48th defense witness on this, the 14th day of the defense case. We are all under the impression that he's going to be the very last witness, but he took the stand about 10 minutes past the hour, and then court ends, 20 minutes later. So he got a little bit of testimony in, not a whole lot. I'll tell you about that in a second. But he has now left the courtroom, and they're doing motions inside the courtroom. Michael Jackson is still in there. Chris Tucker is the second of two big stars to come here. As you mentioned, Jay Leno, and now Chris Tucker, big movie star. In fact, I just read in Variety, he's just signed a new two-picture, $40 million deal to do more of those Rush Hour movies.
Well, who hasn't? Don't you have a $40 million deal, Diane?
Well, they're $40 million movies. I'm not sure it's a $40 million deal just for him. But anyway, he's a big movie star, and Jay Leno is a big star in his own. And this jury has been intently paying attention for most of today. In between, we had some other witnesses that were a little marginal, not even cross-examination on some of them.
Well, we know that some of the comedians who have testified have not testified the way that Tom Mesereau suggested they would in his opening. I can remember Fritz Coleman, the local weather guy who's also a comedian, not testifying as the defense thought he would, instead testifying for the prosecution that the family was a nice family. Louise Palanker saying that she voluntarily gave money to the family. So, Diane, Chris Tucker, did he end up supporting the defense thus far?
George Lopez, too, don't forget. He came here for the state, even though Mesereau had mentioned him in the opening. Yeah, Chris Tucker started off in a surprising fashion. He started talking about the father of this accuser, not the mother, but the father, inviting him to fundraisers at the Laugh Factory. He went to them, or at least one of them, and a few days later he testified the father contacted him and said, you know, we didn't raise enough money. Can you help me out? And he said, so I wired him $15,000 $1,500. Again, it's Tom Mesereau is trying to demonize the mother, not the father, and so far I'm not sure he's done that yet, but you know, Chris Tucker will be back tomorrow. He said that he took this family to one of his movie sets in Las Vegas in the year 2001. They came to his home, and the one thing that I think is going to take them down the path to how this family may be manipulative is, at the end of his testimony, when he said when they were at my home visiting, they said that they were just glad to get out of town, out of East LA, into a nicer section of Los Angeles, and to try to find out where Michael Jackson was. I think that's going to be a running theme here. I think he may even, in tomorrow's testimony, talk about how he was on his way to Miami and somehow this family finagled a ride on his private plane to go to Miami in February of 2003. In fact, the very day that the Bashir documentary was airing.
The family finagled a ride, which would be contrary to their testimony. I remember the accuser testified that Jackson called him and said, I need you to go to Miami to do a press conference. That press conference never happened, but that would be in direct contradiction of the accuser's own testimony then. Well, Diane, I've got to ask you about Jay Leno. We got to cover both comedians. How was his testimony today?
Jay Leno was completely charming, I'll tell you, and I'm not sure that he hit the home run for the defense that they hoped that he would. He came to the stand and he said, you know, I do a lot of charity work. I do a lot of phone calls to sick and needy children, probably 300 a year, 300 a year. And he said, so they sort of run together for me. But I remember John Doe. We call him John Doe. He has an unusual first name, as you know, Lisa, that we don't say on the air. But he said, that's why I remember this child. He called and left me several voicemails because a friend of his, Louise Palanker, gave the number to the child to call, and he said, but it was kind of odd. Another reason I remember him is because he sounded older than just 10 or 11 or 12 years old. He sounded very mature and almost scripted. But Louise Palanker explained it that he always wanted to be a comedian, and it was likely that in his anxiety to reach his idol, he perhaps maybe had written everything down. Anyway, because he got all these voicemails, he finally called Kaiser Permanente Hospital to get in touch with his child to make sure, you know, he really was a sick child. He said, sometimes I get a call from somebody who says, you know, I'm a farmer and I have a tractor that's broken down. And he said, you know, I got to be careful of who I call. So he called there and he said, I did speak to the boy, but he was very, very groggy. Now, remember, he was right in the middle of chemotherapy at the time. So he said he was very groggy. I think I talked to somebody who was his younger brother. I think I talked to somebody who was his mother, but on cross-examination he had to admit that, well, maybe I talked to a nurse, and I'm really not sure that the boy, you know, was cognizant that I was calling because he was groggy. And we remember, Lisa, in his testimony, this boy said, I left one voicemail for Jay Leno, but he said I never, ever spoke to him. So maybe the boy wasn't telling the truth, or maybe he just, the effects of the medication he didn't remember.
In the hospital, and good grief, Diane, is that all that this Jay Leno testimony is about? The boy, I remember on his direct, he said Jay Leno was his idol. He was, I mean, enormous fan of Jay Leno. He just absolutely worshipped him. You know, what a little boy's doing staying up till 11:30 watching Jay Leno is a different question. But he adored
Well, he was
Jay
in the hospital sick, too.
Well, all right, fair enough. But I get the sense that for a long time in his life, he'd been a big Jay Leno fan, but so be it. And he said he called him and he left him messages and he never got called back. And he said, I think I would know if I ever talked to him because I'm such a big fan. Well, now Jay Leno comes in and the bombshell testimony is, yeah, I talked to the kid, but he was groggy and in the hospital. I mean, is that it? Is that all the defense got out of Jay Leno?
Well, yeah.